2019 meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee to order at, let's call it 6:03. Okay. Well, first of all, let me turn the meeting over to Fifi for a moment. She needs to talk to us about reimbursements. Fifi.
Thank you. As you'll see in front of you on the dais, there is a sheet with your last fiscal year 18-19 travel reimbursements. Take a look at it. Make sure your address appears correctly on it. That is where your check will go. My bigger concern at this time is that I counted you correctly for the days that you were present. Now, you are only eligible for this reimbursement once you have completed both the sexual harassment training and the ethics certification. So if you have any questions, please see me after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and before we move on to public comment, I would like to announce that we'll juggle the agenda a little bit this evening. We have two presentations by Richmond and Pleasant Hill, and also another staff presentation. And I would like to move the election of the future chair and vice chair to the end of the meeting. This will provide us a chance to get these folks who have been working all day long and would like to get home a chance to make it as early as possible getting home. And another point on the election of chair and vice chair, I would like to strongly suggest that we not nominate anyone who is not in attendance. So with that, we'll move on in the agenda here. Public comment. Do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Okay. Seeing none. Item C, approval of summary of actions. Has everyone had a chance to look those over? And is there any comment or discussion about them?
I move that we accept them.
I was not present for that meeting, but I would like to enter one change into the record about my attendance. Actually, from April is incorrect. I was present for the April meeting. That's the only change.
Okay. All right. We have a motion to accept the summary of actions.
I second.
And a second by Zane. Thank you. Okay. Skipping over the election, item D, we'll go to general business. Oh, why do I always forget that? Okay, back to summary of actions for a moment. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Or abstentions? One abstention. Okay. All right. Thank you for reminding. Keep me clean. All right. Moving on to a review of the attendance log. So please check over your own attendance on the log, and that way we can ensure that it's accurate. Okay. And with the upcoming meeting calendar, hope everyone has noticed that we sleep next month. There is no meeting scheduled for August. So our next meeting will be the 24th of September. All right. Am I wrong? You're right. It is the 25th. My error. Thank you.
Don't feel so badly. The 24th is my birthday. I would have remembered that.
Okay. Okay, now we move into the meat of the meeting. First of all, we have a review of the City of Richmond's calendar years 2016-2017 growth management checklist.
Chair Wyrick, the staff from Richmond has not arrived yet, so I would suggest that we move on to the next item as Pleasant Hill staff is present.
Okay, I agree with that. Can we have the representatives from Pleasant Hills come forward, and we'll begin that review. I don't know how you folks would like to do it. If you have a presentation that you want to give us, telling us about, major highlights of the 2016-2017 period, or what's going on now, if you want to sell us your city, that's fine too. So,
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is Eric Hugh with the City of Pleasant Hill, and with me today is Troy Fujimoto, our Senior Planner from the City of Pleasant Hill. I see our Pleasant Hill rep is not here yet, so I was going to introduce ourselves to him or her. But no really presentation tonight, just kind of a quick summary of the checklist that you guys may have already seen. Overall, again, as a reminder, this checklist for calendar year 16 and 17 for release of funds for 17-18 and 18-19. During calendar year 16 and 17, in general, Pleasant Hill has been busy, a lot of things going on, but for the purpose of the checklist, a couple of CIP projects, most of which you probably drive through from a day-to-day basis, some on Contra Costa Boulevard, some on Gary Road, that pertains particularly to the checklist, both of which are complete streets projects, and majority grant-funded projects. Gary Road was a joint project with the City of Walnut Creek, as many of you know, and that's the project that was primarily Measure J funded. Okay. On the development end, we have a number of developments, however, most of which are not sizable enough to trigger any notifications per the Measure J growth management program. We did also City Council actually approved 2 general plan amendments, again, the nature of which is not significant enough to warrant any regional significance, I guess, per the Measure J program. So if anything, I'll just open it up back to you guys to ask us any questions or curiosities you might have regarding the City of Pleasant Hill.
thank you very much, Eric. All right, it's open for questions. Yes, Edward?
That's Ed Miller from Clayton. I noticed you guys took very much to heart that Measure J was about fixing potholes and stuff like that, just repairs. I wondered, one of the things that I love to see on these types of money spent is like traffic signal timings, things that will improve the efficiency of which is already there. Do you anticipate any kinds of projects as you maybe go forward asking for monies in the future years here to improve signal timings or anything that's designed to improve flow and, not just fill in a pothole, so to speak?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So as many cities, Pleasant Hill, we actually evaluate our signal timings regularly. As those of you who live in the area will probably experience, right now Contra Costa Boulevard is our main regional route, at least in the north and south direction, and 80% of the city's commercial centers are fronting it. It's also obviously the ideal parallel route to the 680 freeway. And so, however, with that said, Pleasant Hill is in a kind of a beneficial position where we're on the west side of 680, so we're not as heavily impacted by some of the regional cut-through traffic that, for example, Walnut Creek and Concord experience from not just Clayton, but also East County as well. And so for Pleasant Hill, most of our cut-through traffic are along 680 regional traffic. If 680 backs up, it backs onto Contra Costa Boulevard, which quickly backs up, and then it goes into our few local streets that parallel Contra Costa Boulevard. And then on certain streets like Taylor Boulevard and Pleasant Hill Road, we have residents from Martinez who are trying to bypass the freeway, and they can cut through to, that way to Lafayette if they're going down the 24 route. So, so while we continue to monitor the signal timings, fortunately, we don't have the challenge that I know Concord and Walnut Creek constantly have regarding Ignacio Valley Road, for example, where they're constantly in real time trying to, make the signal timing more efficient, squeeze as many traffic efficiently as through the same 6 lanes as possible. We fortunately do not have as much of a challenge from that aspect, except for holiday season. That's all bets are off during that, between Thanksgiving and New Year's. But we do constantly monitor the signal timings and update as we need to. That's regardless of Measure J. Now, on the other hand, we are in the process of installing new signals in the city, just like a lot of other jurisdictions, but most of our new infrastructure, including signal installation, are funded with grant funds. Could be Measure J or state federal grants. So none of the return to source that we're asking for here tonight goes towards those kind of improvement projects. Most of our return to source do go to pavement maintenance or actually streetlight maintenance, but not in any kind of enhancement work. Those are usually done through other funding sources.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay, any further questions?
Yeah, I'd like to, this is Ken Strongman from Walnut Creek, talk to you about the new development on Mayhew. First of all, thank you for the signal that's on Mayhew and I think it's Buskirk. That was needed a few decades ago, personally. But the development has requirement that some of the units have auxiliary units. And why didn't you require all of them to have auxiliary units?
That project complied with our inclusionary housing ordinance, and so there was no, they had satisfied and actually provided more than what our inclusionary ordinance requires, so they actually exceeded the affordable levels that we currently have in place. And so when they do that, the city is hard pressed to require every additional units beyond that. So the fact that they provided more than what is our basic minimum, the city was pleased with that.
Okay, thank you. Is that Walnut Creek Manor across the street from that project in Pleasant Hill, or is that county?
That's county.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Patricia?
Just a question about ADUs. When the gentleman who was here before was very interested in them in Pleasant Hill, and I am too. And I have a question for you. These tiny houses are becoming very, very popular. They are, under 400 square feet. There's a lot of people looking into these. Amazon sells 20 different plans of them. What do you require for a tiny house on a private property?
I'm not sure what you mean by what do we require. We allow ADUs and they can be manufactured. We don't have any provisions that prohibit tiny houses, as you call them. There is a minimum size limitation and a maximum size limitation. We do limited design review. The state of California limits what individual cities can look at in terms of ADUs. They have to meet code, clearly. They have to meet building code requirements. So that's kind of the baseline. But in terms of beyond that, we in the city look more for development standards related to setbacks, lot coverage, and then the appearance of it. That's kind of what we look at with ADUs.
So you do require the same permitting, same everything for under 400 square feet?
Size doesn't matter. It still requires a building permit. I believe that we don't have utilities, but I believe that utilities either may or may not have to, I guess, limit, if you will, the fees that they have. But I think that's an ongoing thing with, for example, the water district and the sanitary sewer. But since we don't control them, we're not really aware how they treat them in terms of fees. But for us, they're treated similar as any building addition or anything else. The fees are based on essentially what they propose.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Kenneth, would you like to?
Yes, I move that we accept their report and move it on to the next level.
All right, thank you, Kenneth.
I will second the motion.
All right, thank you for your second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it's unanimous, and thank you very much for your report. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I don't see any representatives from Richmond just yet, so I guess we'll move to the presentation on the electric vehicle readiness blueprint.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Peter Engel. I'm the Director of Programs here for the Transportation Authority. So about 8 months ago, we received a $200,000 grant from the California Energy Commission to prepare the Contra Costa Electric Vehicle Readiness Blueprint. This was a specific grant source that was specifically for jurisdictions to create these blueprints to help figure out how that jurisdiction was going to roll out EVs within their purview. This was a phase two. This was a phase one of the CEC project. Phase two will actually provide funding for findings and recommendations that we had come up in the EV readiness blueprint. So based on that, we had to have the EV readiness blueprint to the CEC by the end of this month in order to be eligible for the phase two funding. We did get a late start on this. We initially weren't awarded the funds. There was just a certain level of funding that was spread throughout the state. And in the Northern California Bay Area section of the state, we were just below the cutoff list. But one of the awardees ended up that they couldn't do the project, so we were bumped up about a month late and awarded the money. So we got about a month late start on this. So we really did a lot of work in the last 8 months to get this ready. And this is just a little bit of a project timeline on what we did. We ended up hiring the Cadmus Group as a consultant. They specialize in this type of work to prepare the study. Over the last 8 months, we did significant stakeholder engagement. We had 4 public workshops that we had an extensive list of stakeholders from jurisdictions, private providers of both vehicles and vehicle infrastructure charging units, utilities, anybody you can think of that had some interest in EV charging, OEM vehicle manufacturers, et cetera. And we had a lot of good turnout at each of these and a lot of good discussion. The draft blueprint was prepared. Our board adopted it last week at its board meeting, and we are preparing now the final report and the format that the CEC needs to send in by July 31st. So there's essentially 2 reports. There's the report that we're sending to the CEC that's within their format, and then there's the actual blueprint report, which typically you would see that would come from a planning study from the authority. And there's going to be a significant online presence on our webpage because at least two of the tasks in the report we consider to be kind of living documents. One is a mapping function that is interactive. I'll get more into that later. Sorry. So, as you know, the authority tries to stay on top of all innovative transportation projects if we can. EVs is clearly in the forefront for helping to reduce emissions. And we are really trying to find a way to accelerate the rollout of EVs in Contra Costa County. These are a few slides here that just kind of show the adoption rate. So we've seen significant adoption in the county as far as vehicle sales. Those continue to increase, but we still have a way to go. Contra Costa is ranked in the top 10 California counties with the highest number of EVs per capita. We do lag behind a little bit in the EV infrastructure, the charging units. So that's where we're going to try and focus a lot of future funding that we apply for. This shows that a little bit better, the fact that the charging infrastructure is a little bit behind. So we did run some potential, we looked at some potential cases. There's basically 3 different studies that have been done recently. U.S. Energy Information Administration, the CEC did a study, and so we kind of took all those into account, the executive order that was done to help achieve carbon neutrality. We took kind of all those into account as we looked at what do we really need to do to kind of meet our goals and meet the goals of the state as we move forward. We have about a 10% estimate by 2025, and so again, we've designed some strategies that I'll cover a little bit at the end to help us meet that the projections that we need to meet. This is just a graphic that shows you kind of the 3 cases and what it would mean that we need to do to reach those potential cases. We do have some partnerships and opportunities available to us, both the Air District and PG&E, Marin Community Energy, which is, I think now Marin Contra Costa Community Energy, and Electrify America all have. Electrify America is funded by the Volkswagen settlement. And all of these agencies, including what's not shown here, I think it's on the next slide, is the California Energy Commission, have funding that's coming out over the next year that we will be applying for to help increase charging infrastructure in the county. This is the Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust. This was a court-ordered program, and $5 million will be available statewide. And we anticipate that the call for projects on this will come out in late summer of this year. That will be strictly for charging stations. They also have a significant amount of money for transit and school buses. They have different categories: transit, school buses. There's ports. There's vessel, seagoing vessels and stuff like that for electrifying or either looking at electrification or hydrogen fuel type vehicles. But we're going to be focused primarily for this program on the EV charging stations. This is what I mentioned earlier. Phase 1 was this EV Ready Communities Challenge. Blueprints. Phase 2 will be funding for implementing some of the findings in the blueprint studies. So we're looking forward to submitting grants for that, grant applications. Some of the highlights of the blueprint. We looked at shared mobility hubs. Shared mobility hubs is kind of a park and ride lot on steroids, I guess would be a good name to say. It's not just for parking, it's for micromobility use, so shared bikes, scooters, things like that. Car share, we'd be looking to electrifying whatever we can as far as vehicles, electric bikes, electric scooters, electric cars, so they'd have to be charging there. We're even anticipating some in the future en route charging of transit buses. So assuming the route works out correctly, a bus could pull into the shared mobility hub for 10 minutes, get a little kick charge, boost the battery up a little bit, and then continue on its way. Of course, there'd be parking for cars, and these would be primarily transfer locations where people could take first mile, last mile mobility options into a hub and then catch a mainline transit, whether it's BART or one of the bus lines. Another task of this was workforce development. We had the consultant put together a framework for two workforce development programs, one for electricians and one for mechanics. We think it's important to get the workforce ready for these new technologies, and there's going to be a significant amount of charging installations, which require electricians with specific certifications and mechanics to work on the electric vehicles. So we've put together some suggested training and curricula, and this might be one of the programs that we move forward for additional funding to help solidify this. There is a lot of interest both in Pittsburgh with the high school, Pittsburgh High, and the Contra Costa Community College District is interested in this program as well. These are two of what I consider to be living documents, a best practice toolbox. It will be online, and it'll be available primarily for planning staffs within each of the jurisdictions to use as they're considering new developments in the county, so that they can, well, actually in this case, I'm getting them mixed up. The best practices toolbox would be for city staff to use to put together things like plan development standards, policies, ordinances that would help drive maybe permitting for the cities when a project comes in that wants to do some EV charging installation. We'd be looking for opportunities where there would be streamlined permitting for that. There would also be potentially policies, so everybody followed similar policies associated with, is this a parking space or is it a charging station? One of the issues we see a lot is that people, will park their vehicle at a charging station and leave it there for 8 hours, and that doesn't allow other people to charge their vehicles. So this is going to be a best practices toolbox that's available to jurisdictions. One of the things that we have as far as one of our strategies is to take that a little farther and start getting all the jurisdictions together and seeing if we can identify very specific policies that all of the cities can adopt, so that when developers or others come into the county, they are comfortable with it, whatever jurisdiction they go in, that's going to be very similar policies and processes for electrification. The mapping analysis is what will be primarily for the planning staff. Essentially, it's going to help us as we identify funding or use local funds. We want to make sure that they're spent in the right places in the county. So the mapping function is a layered map that can show where the existing vehicles are, electric vehicles in the county, where the existing infrastructure is as far as charging stations, land use, so it can identify where multifamily housing is or is going to be, where office space is or going to be, so we can start to identify locations that are appropriate for the investment that we would put in. We're also going to look at disadvantaged communities and how can we invest in disadvantaged communities to try and have the adoption rate for EVs in those communities increase. This is just a sample of a couple of the maps, some analysis that was done. Again, you'll be able to go online, pull up these maps, click on different layers to kind of see the different information with respect to EV charging. So there's, as far as the strategies, there's 10 short-term strategies, 3 medium-term strategies, and 4 longer-term strategies that we put in there to help enhance and accelerate EV adoption in the county. I won't go through all those. We have them set up under these different 9 areas of influence. Just to give you just kind of an idea of what they look like. So strategy number 2 would be to install infrastructure in priority areas. The strategy identifies kind of who would be the lead agency on something like that, whether it be the authority or one of the jurisdictions or workforce development board or something like that. Kind of an idea of what if it's a high cost or a low cost, and some of the just some of the effort that would go to maybe do that particular strategy. Here's another one. We want to amplify regional outreach to consumers, site hosts, and other entities. So putting on driving events where we bring in electric vehicles for people to try, things like that. Adopt and promote EV reach codes. So reach codes are things, jurisdictional development things and stuff that actually are designed to make EV adoption a lot easier. So, changing the parking ratios that would help identify ease of use for vehicle charging and things like that. Here's one I mentioned earlier: adopt and promote streamlined permitting. So I just wanted to go through a few of these and just kind of show you basically what's in the plan. And again, we're going to be dedicating a site. We should have the URL for that. It's going to be part of the CCTA webpage, but there will be a page dedicated to this so that it'll be a tool that people can access easily to use. And then again, as this funding comes forward in the next year or so, this is kind of designed from our perspective to be a short-term guide for us to use to put ourselves in a position to obtain some of this available funding that's going to be out there through Volkswagen Mitigation, CEC, and things like that. So,
thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. I had a question for you. Do you have an idea of what a typical charging station costs to install?
Yeah, the station itself isn't super expensive. For a level 2 type charging, which would typically take, 4 to 6 hours to charge a vehicle, is usually about $2,500 to $3,000. It's the installation part that is more expensive, and that just depends on the site. So if there's trenching involved, of course the cost goes way up. If it's a matter of it's a building where there's already access to electrical conduits and the panels are up to code to be able to allow it, it's much less expensive. Some of these funding sources you see, like from PG&E, are actually to help improve the back end, or what do they call it, the behind the meter, where they're putting the infrastructure in place and basically running conduit, so then you can just do quick installations and not have the heavy cost of the electrical grid work to do. So price varies. Now, some of the DC chargers, which is the fast chargers that you see start to pop up, you see them at like Whole Foods and stuff like that will charge your vehicle in 15 to 20 to 30 minutes. Those are, now you're talking in the $20,000 to $30,000 to $40,000 range, because typically they require a larger transformer that would need to be installed to be able to handle the power for something like that.
And I imagine that people who use these charging stations will be paying for their charge somehow?
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting topic. So typically what we see right now is lots of places, like our building here, the building actually covers the power charge for that. If you go to Whole Foods, you're going to see that when you swipe your card to unlock the charger, that you're charged maybe $2 a minute or $1 a minute or some fee for that. Whatever the deal is made with PG&E as to whoever owns that charging station, they'll basically pay PG&E's meter rate, which depends on peak time and all that stuff. But whoever owns the charger is actually allowed to charge, whatever they want. So it's kind of a market-driven thing. That's also a way that we can kind of have turnover on those charges. Somebody's parking there. One of the ways to handle that is the first hour of charge is, maybe $5 or something, but after that, all of a sudden now you're getting charged $2 or $3 a minute. So it discourages somebody from just keeping their car parked there and keeping it plugged in. So there's ways to use the rates that people would pay to help motivate them to move their car when the charge is finished. But again, it's up to the owner of the charging station to kind of set their rates.
So it's a system yet to be completely evolved.
Yeah, and most of the systems are networked. So a company that provides a charging system will have a network, and so people who use, it's almost like a fueling, like a petroleum station. If it's Shell or Chevron, they'll have, a price point that they typically use, and people are, tend to go to a particular station that they might favor. I mean, I don't, but you're either a Chevron person or you have your card and all that stuff, and so some of these the same way. ChargePoint's a big one that I'm sure you've all heard of. That is a network system, and they have a certain rate that they charge, and people have their ChargePoint cards, so they easily know how to use their chargers and stuff.
Okay. Folks, any questions?
Yes, I have a question. You said that 50% of your funds are going to you're going to be funding disadvantaged communities. And where are they?
Yeah, so there's a requirement in the for the Volkswagen mitigation funds. There's actually a requirement that statewide 50% of the funds be used for disadvantaged communities. So how they're handling it right now is this first round of funding, they're just going to kind of see where the proposals come in, and then they might make adjustments in a second round to, if not enough funds are coming in for disadvantaged to put infrastructure in disadvantaged communities, they would make adjustments to require more. So it's kind of an aggregate of the whole state, that 50%. And to answer your second question, so the disadvantaged communities are actually defined in state legislation using what's that thing called, Matt? Do you remember what? CalEnviroscreen, and it looks at income level, it looks at air quality within different communities and things like that, and it basically establishes these. In Contra Costa, we have the Antioch-Pittsburgh area is considered a CalEnviroscreen disadvantaged community. The Richmond area is one, and I think that's it. So, yeah, Monument Corridor actually used to be considered a community of concern. It met MTC standards, but I do not believe it meets the CalEnviroscreen standards as a disadvantaged community. So one of the things that we've been asking for is, can the state come to, a single kind of definition of what these, what is a community of concern or a disadvantaged community? It would make it a lot easier for planning purposes.
So how far east are you going? Is it just to Antioch? Because we have some disadvantaged areas a little farther out.
Yeah, we're going to, we'll go, this is going to be a countywide program. So we'll look at disadvantaged communities all over, but again, only 50% of the funds need to be, 50% of the funds would need to be there. And again, it's not specific to any particular project. It's a statewide aggregate. So it's up to people at the air board to kind of decide. They're the ones that are overseeing the use of the Volkswagen mitigation funds. So it'll be up to them to decide, how that 50% is spread out and if it's being met throughout the state. But again, there are disadvantaged communities throughout the county. Like Matt was saying, the Monument Corridor area, there are some farther east than Antioch, but they don't meet the criteria that the state uses when they're saying, this is a disadvantaged community.
Okay. Zane?
I have a question. So when you speak about electrical charging, if it's my understanding, I think there's like maybe 9 or 12 or 15 different technologies. Did you guys look at how using separate technologies make sure everybody's car can fill up? And on the other hand, in case new technologies come out, how they could update the chargers? That way maybe somebody's investment doesn't, it's, upgradable, meaning next 2 years or few years, they have those options?
Yeah, so there's 3 or 4 different, the part that is really standardized is the plug itself. It's not necessarily the charging. I mean, from the consumer's perspective, it's the plug itself. And there's 3 or 4 different kinds, but almost every single vehicle comes with an adapter so that they can be used. Well, I shouldn't say the problem. The one OEM that's different is Tesla. So a Tesla can charge at any station, but not any other car can charge at a Tesla station. So Tesla spends a lot of money putting in these supercharging stations, and nobody can charge at them except Tesla owners. But Tesla owners do have an adapter where they can charge at other things. So, we've identified that. The tool that we use in our map is actually a website that's available to everybody that's called PlugShare, I think. And it actually identifies the type of charger that it is. So if it's a Tesla or non-Tesla, if it's level 1 or level 2 or DC fast charge, it identifies if the charging unit's down for some reason and needs somebody to come and do some work on it, if it's being used at the time or not being used. So there's a lot of information from that particular thing. And it's one of the things we're still kind of talking about internally and that we'll work with the cities in is how to display the types of chargers. And it's Tesla and everybody else, and how we kind of display that, because we don't want to encourage, if there's an area in the county that has 3 or 4 Tesla chargers but nothing else, we don't want to say, well, there's chargers there, because maybe they're not chargers that work for everybody. We want to make sure that we have, the chargers that most people can use.
Thank you. One last question was, as far as the way that the funding is, I think it said a certain percentage would be covered for private property owners, some would be for commercial, and some would be for government-owned property. Are we going to be offering incentives to homeowners to add on to what's already available by the state?
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to is in the Volkswagen mitigation settlement. There's different levels depending on who applies for the funds. So anybody, I shouldn't say anybody, but private companies can apply for the funds as well as government agencies. But depending on who applies for it, there's a requirement or no match. So for government agencies, there's no match requirement. For corporations or businesses who apply so they could do installation, there is a match requirement. So we are going to encourage different charging. So if you're talking about in-home, we may look at opportunities for in-home charging. One of the things that we're looking at potentially is just working with a city to put together kind of a toolbox that the dealerships can hand out when people buy the vehicles, that provides information on electricians that are certified in the area that are meet certain qualifications, the permitting process, just little things like that can help them to do an installation in their garage, and make sure that it's done safely by a professional.
I think
to help with that.
I think it was more towards private property owners, like more Whole Foods and more restaurants and more. We would prefer that many of them have that available, so people make charging easier. They go wherever they want and they find loads of chargers.
Yeah, how we've historically done it is we don't mind if it's on if it's on, private property like a grocery store or at a mall or something, as long as it's open to the public. That's the only criteria that we really care about. If it's someplace that's behind gates or something, then we're not going to use public funds to help fund something like that, unless it's a fleet and it's specifically designed for, and that would be a special circumstance where we find some type of grant to help a company that has large fleets, say. I should say PG&E, you think that would be,
UPS or somebody.
Yeah, UPS or somebody like that, or the county that has a fleet of vehicles that would help, in a significant way, convert those to electric use by providing the infrastructure.
I applaud your efforts to make sure that we get it for retail and public-facing industries, and thank you.
Yeah, Edward? Okay.
Okay, just more high-level questions. How do we guarantee that the power supply coming into the chargers is green and that we're not burning coal out in the valley somewhere to generate electricity?
Yeah, that's always an important thing. So part of our partnership is to work with MCE, which is a community energy thing who works to make sure that sustainable energy is part of the grid at some level. And I think 9 of the jurisdictions now, do you know, Matt, is it 9 of the 20 jurisdictions in the county are part of MCE? The study does identify some clean energy potential as far as like the shared mobility hubs. But other than that, I mean, where we are in Northern California, we're kind of subject to the existing grid, which is run by PG&E and the power that they supply to it. So we're strictly looking at this from, an infrastructure perspective of the charging units and only getting into kind of the grid part of it if there's not transformers in place or something that can allow that electricity to be used to charge vehicles. So.
With that, I'd like to do a follow-up question. You may not be able to answer it totally, but assuming we magically converted all of our vehicles to electricity tonight, is there enough electricity in the system to charge them?
That's a good PG&E question. I don't think so. I don't think there is. We'd have a problem. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Yes?
Thank you, Larry. Ed Miller from Clayton. One comment and 2 questions. The one comment's really fast. Last night on the CCTA telecon, they had one of the survey questions was specifically about the interest level of the participants in EV charging being distributed through so that might be of interest to get the results from that, although it'd be a very limited survey. But the second, so the other 2 things are questions. One's a really quick one, which is, what's the general range of cost? When we say we got $5 million across the entire state, possibly in this fund for chargers, then what does $5 million look like in number of installations that can happen? A range. Like, do they range from 70,000 to,
per installation?
Per installation.
I'd say, I'm trying to think, so the college district just did a project where that I'm going to say is about $150,000, and I think it's close to
70 units. 76, I think you said?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I saw a bigger number on the screen earlier.
Well, I was thinking as far as the charging heads, I think it's 70-something charging, and that's spread throughout there. So that's dependent on Air District funds, and then we're locally providing some matching funds to the Air District funds, and I can't remember what the total is.
So you were thinking maybe 70 heads and about 150,000 capital outlay?
Again, it depends on how many chargers are you putting in one kind of installation area where you can do the construction once,
if you onesie twosie it, it's going to be very expensive.
It's going to be more expensive.
Sure.
That's correct.
Okay, that makes good sense.
But if you can, And it would be helpful in new construction if there's commercial construction that they're at least putting in conduit and things so that you can easily just pull the
Later.
lines in and do the installation. So, and that's in the works. I believe the California state building codes now require some level of groundwork to be able to install quickly EV charging.
Okay. And then the last question, which I actually thought I thought you were going to go there, but I'm going to go there. It was close. Do you feel like is this a sustainable, scalable path realistically as compared to something like hydrogen, which I know is not economically doable on a vehicle cost basis quite yet, but if we continue down this path and we did achieve 80% concentration in 20 years or something, where everybody's rotated over into a vehicle like this, mathematically, is it even realistically possible that there'll be charging infrastructure available? I see people competing already, and there's not that much. I mean, are we going down a road that we can't really reach the end of?
Well, that's a good question. I'll give you my personal opinion. Well, like any technology, it's changing rapidly. I think charging that you see today versus EV charging that you see 10 years from now will be completely different. There won't be, I don't think there will be cables that you have to plug into your car. It'll just be wireless, and you'll drive on a pad and it'll charge. What happens with battery technology is anybody's guess. I mean, if I knew what was happening with that, I wouldn't be working here. Because it's, and there's a downside to batteries the way they are now. There's a disposal problem. So that
in some ways, we're trading one environmental
exactly
problem
right.
for another
so
one. Absolutely,
that technology needs to change and it needs to improve. I think the short-term issue is the need for extensive infrastructure for charging, because as batteries become more efficient and you can go a lot more miles off a charge, more people will just be charging at home. They won't need the extensive infrastructure. Beyond the cost of, because the cost isn't super high for the individual chargers, and like any technology, like a laptop, they're good for 5 years, and then they need to be replaced anyway. So they are kind of potentially a short-term solution, other than the cost to install them. So we, ideally, one of the criteria that we could look at is ease of installation. If it's in a building structure where there's, piped or conduit electricity, so you don't have to, dig a trench or anything like that. The more cost we can keep down on getting the electricity to the charger. The chargers are almost, after 3 or 4 or 5 years, they need to be replaced anyway. So we'll be able to make quick changes to how the technology is changing.
Yeah, I just wish, and as I said earlier, it's unfortunate that the platinum, they're going to have to figure out different materials that they can dope with. But if hydrogen was here today, then we'd all be able to just go up and fill up like we do at the gas station in 5 minutes, and there'd be no concern for charging.
Or maybe we'll have little hydrogen plants at our houses.
Yeah, I actually, I mentioned to someone that my dream was that someday, well, right now, the hydrogen tanks that are on hydrogen vehicles, they're very big. I don't know what the pressure, I don't know how much pressure they store. Maybe for safety, it's not at a very high pressure, but they're very large. But my dream would be that you drive up to that Whole Foods, and instead of plugging in, you go inside and, you pop open your gas cap and pop out a canister, and just go in and replace a one-for-one exchange, just like you would do a barbecue grill tank, and you're back on the road with no fill-up time. Something along those lines, but that's so far from where we are today.
They are developing that battery technology for electric bikes and scooters that have a pop-off battery, and there's a company that's designing a cell. What do you call it? It's kind of like a cell block's not the right word, but it's like a large block that might be at a park and ride lot or something, and you just
You
pull
turn
up
in
to
your,
it,
your,
and
ex,
you
your
turn
exchange
it,
battery.
You put in one battery, and it kicks out another one, and the battery you put in charges.
That's
while
awesome.
It's in there, and then so you're just exchanging batteries all the time.
That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, everyone, for your questions. And do we have any more before we, yes?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for coming.
Sure.
I just wanted to touch on something you'd said about sort of school buses being something we could potentially use in a project as part of the VW settlement. And you'd also mentioned just sort of curricula and training regarding how to install these things. And I wonder, like, you had mentioned Pittsburgh in particular, but like, have you had a conversation to sort of join these two together or some way incentivize, some participants there?
Yeah, so Pittsburgh Unified is actually kind of out in front of all this. They have two and are getting two more electric buses. Interestingly, school buses kind of electrification works well with them because they're not on the road all day. They go out for a couple hours in the morning and they can bring them back and they can plug them in and recharge them, and they go out for a couple hours in the afternoon, so it works well. So they are doing some pilots with that. The school district also, we partnered with them to go after a California Department of Education grant to retool their auto shop from a combustion engine, mechanics to both autonomous and electric vehicles. So they received, I think, $500,000, and our job is to try and find them an autonomous shuttle that the kids can work on. So there is a lot of actual, boots on the ground work being done in that area.
That's pretty exciting. So how about for communities like that are disadvantaged, or according to sort of the state term, I think you said Antioch, would the school board there or the folks there need to reach out to you to sort of say, hey, could we do this together? Or are you guys proactively sort of going to them for that conversation?
Staff works together. It's usually a staff-to-staff kind of thing. So either we'll hear about something or they'll hear about something, and we'll just get in touch with you. So far, it's just kind of worked organically. So, and right now we don't want to get too far ahead, and we want to kind of pilot this and see if it works. Gotcha. And see how it works out. And then, a lot of these funding sources are based on somebody did this and it worked great. So let's, see if there's some money to put behind it at the state level.
So we shouldn't forward your phone and email on to everyone yet?
You can if you want. Yeah, you can if you want. We're always willing to sit down and talk to different people and see if we can get something started.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? If not, thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.
I believe that we have a representative from Richmond now, and we will entertain their report. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Tawfiq Halabi. I work for the City of Richmond. And I apologize for being late. I don't know if you realize I was an hour late. It's my first time coming to this meeting. I want to clarify that I work for the Engineering and Capital Improvement Projects Department. And I'm a civil engineer, and I manage capital projects for the City of Richmond. I'm filling in for the Planning Division this evening, and I brought some talking points to be able to give a brief presentation tonight for the Measure J subject matter.
Okay, feel free.
Okay.
Jump right in.
Thank you. So I have three main points that I wanted to bring to your attention this evening. And I'll name them. The Southern Gateway Specific Plan in Richmond, the mitigation measures that the city has for developments, and housing data. So I'll go through each of these and I'll have a little bit of information for you. Information that I've gleaned from the city planners that have been addressing these matters. So for the reporting period of 2016 and 2017 for Measure J, during this time period, the City of Richmond has adopted the Richmond Bay Specific Plan. It was adopted in December of 2016, and this allowed the city to fulfill the need for a Southern Gateway Specific Plan that was based on the land use and economic development elements of the City of Richmond's General Plan 2030. So this Southern Gateway Specific Plan, it's in concept is to transform what they call the Richmond Bay area. The idea is to transform it into a model mixed-use neighborhood with a strong emphasis on economic development through various goals and policies and implementing actions. This was achieved through an amendment of the general plan, and when this was adopted, that opened the opportunities for new development and for housing and commercial development of this Richmond Bay area. It sounds very strange, Richmond Bay area, but it's the Richmond Bay area. So the idea was to transform it into a mixed-use neighborhood with various pedestrian-oriented and efficient multimodal connectivities as well. The one that comes to mind, it's actually under construction now, is called NOMA, N-O-M-A. It's a very fancy acronym for North of Marina. So we have SOMA in San Francisco, we have NOMA in Richmond. So I just want to let you know Richmond has arrived on the map because we have fancy acronyms. It is a development that's under construction, and they have townhomes and work-live lofts, and it's actually within walking distance to the Richmond Ferry. And in the very near future, a project that I'm managing called the Richmond Wellness Trail will actually have a what they call a cycle track from NOMA's front door all the way up to the Richmond Greenway, and then the Richmond Greenway will also have a connection to the Richmond BART. So there'll be a continuous connection from this residential development on the one hand to the ferry, on the other hand to the Richmond Greenway, which not only goes to the BART, but we're also building connectivity to the Richmond San Rafael Bridge through the bicycle pedestrian project that is actually currently under construction. We have a lot going on in Richmond, so please come and visit us. So that's the first point, was the Southern Gateway. The second point was the mitigation measures. So from my preliminary assessment, I found two worthy notes for mitigation. So, of course, you have the developer fees. So when these developments come in, such as NOMA and others, then they pay into the pot, and then that pot of money then is used for mitigation measures. And the other one is the Subregional Transportation Program. I'm not familiar with the Subregional Transportation Program, but apparently it is being implemented, and it's part of a West County sub-regional mitigation program, and the city is also utilizing that. So we have two pots of money that go towards mitigation for these various developments. And lastly, a little bit of information about the housing data and production. So I heard these Assembly Bills 2299 and 1069. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the content of the bills, but I know that those impact then the developments that we're putting in Richmond. So I'm happy to report that there are housing units being developed in Richmond. In 2016, we had 56 units, and I think that was the beginning of this housing boom in terms of construction boom that we're having in Richmond. So in 2016, 56 units. In 2017, 138 units. Of the 138 units, 79 were designated as very low. And I think in parlance, that means very low income. So that's good news. And I can tell you that in 2018 and 2019, there's a lot more construction going on for housing units. I don't know where they stand on the very low income and the low income and the moderate income. But that's good news. We have land, we are expanding. We have new developments coming in, specifically for housing in Richmond. I'd like to name one specifically, the Miraflores Senior Housing Development. If you've driven on Highway 80, many years ago, we used to have some nurseries right off the highway off of Cutting Boulevard. Well, those nurseries have been removed. I'm happy to say that the redevelopment agency at the time was able to preserve some of the historic homes that were owned by local Japanese American families, and some of those families are still in the neighborhood across the highway. It didn't used to be across the highway, but it's now across the highway. And I've met and been neighbors with some of the descendants of the residents of that neighborhood. So that, for me, that speaks volumes about the continuity and the importance of preserving the cultural heritage in our neighborhoods in Richmond. So we have preserved 3 or 4 structures that were part of the historic nursery, and the idea is in the future to make those destinations and points of interest in connection with Rosie the Riveter and World War II era tours. That Miraflores senior housing development had enabled the city's numbers to really increase during the reporting period and entitlement of passage AB 2299 and SB 1069. So those are within the category of accessory dwelling units. So those are the 3 things that I had to talk about with the various planners so that I could present you some information. I could talk about the capital projects, and I do have some information for you on the capital projects. One that I'm very proud of, I'm not managing it myself, but I'm very proud of it. It's called the Goodrick Bay Trail. I don't know if you're aware, but we have, of course, we have the Bay Trail in Richmond, and we like to boast that we have more shoreline than any other city in the Bay Area. And we have more Bay Trail than any other city in the Bay Area as a consequence of that. So we are now, I would say, in the final stages of having full connectivity along the shoreline with respect to the Bay Trail. And we have a Keystone project, a gap filling project that we call the Goodrick Bay Trail project. And once that is completed, then there will be some sort of continuity pretty much ringing Richmond. The only place where we don't have trails on the bay is through an industrial area, but we do have a plan to put the Bay Trail through some city streets to connect all the Bay Trails that are actually on the water. So that's something that we're doing right now, and that's funded by Measure J. It's the Goodrick Bay Trail project. We got about $1 million in Measure J funding. Some of the other projects that I would like to highlight here, of course, is the ferry service. So we have the ferry service that has it started January 10th, I believe, and the ridership is so high that it's exceeded expectations. In fact, I think the numbers are now where the planners thought they would be in 3 to 5 years. And there's talk about putting in some weekend service starting on August 3rd. Another excuse to come and visit us in Richmond. I'm managing a project called the Richmond Wellness Trail. It's phase 1. The concept is that we will have these walking circuits in historically underserved neighborhoods. We have Kaiser Permanente, which is a big part of this. We have the National Park Service, which is a big part of this. And we have the BART facilities in the Richmond Greenway. So the concept is to get people out and walking and biking. And the Richmond Greenway would serve as the spine of these activities. Just today I visited the Richmond Greenway, and I was so pleasantly surprised at the local nonprofits that are going after grants to build on the Richmond Greenway. They're building facilities for young people, BMX facilities, basketball courts. They're planting trees. They're teaching local children from the historically underserved neighborhood how to plant trees and how to take care of trees and how to pick the right species and make sure the soil is the right soil and these types of things. I'm very, very proud of the work that's being done on the Richmond Greenway. Another important corridor is the I-80 Central Avenue project. We recently completed phase 1. Phase 1 was a pavement rehabilitation, ADA upgrade, and then also diverting some of the traffic during the high congestion hours, which are actually on the weekends between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. It's a little counterintuitive. You'd think that the high congestion areas are during commute hours. However, in this instance, there's a shopping mall that's a popular destination on the weekends, and it's causing a lot of congestion on top of the existing congestion. In a couple of years, we'll be implementing phase 2 of that project, which involves extending a local road, taking some right-of-way from locally owned, privately owned parcels, and spacing out some traffic signals so there's more queuing space. So those are some of the projects I wanted to highlight where we have Measure J funding. I mean, I can go on and on about Richmond. I think you understand I love Richmond, and I'm very happy and proud to be here to present Richmond, even though I'm not a planner and I don't speak the planning language. So I would be happy to take any questions, and any questions that are more appropriate for planners, I'll have to take notes and then go back to my colleagues and then somehow get the information to Mr. Kelly so that he can disperse the information to the members of the commission.
Okay, thank you. It sounds very interesting. I mean, you've awakened an interest in me to come explore. So I hope I get a chance to come over and explore Richmond sometime. Okay, let's open it up for any questions. Ken?
I'm looking at the, back in the appendix in the street and road maintenance audit reporting form, it mentions that there are $150,000 of Measure J funds being spent for design services for complete streets on San Pablo Avenue.
Yes. I can explain that.
But no, I'm not. I'm enthused about that just because I'm in Pinole and we also share part of San Pablo Avenue, and I'm really interested in anything that other cities are doing to make San Pablo Avenue a complete street. And I was just wondering, I know the San Pablo Avenue corridor project. It includes Richmond. It doesn't include Pinole. My dream is that somehow Pinole could kind of get on that train and participate. But I guess I had a couple of questions. One is, I know that San Pablo Avenue corridor project is a long ways out. It's still in the early phases. Is this something that this design work that Richmond is doing, it's kind of separate from that and maybe doing some things ahead of time in anticipation of what's coming down the road? Yeah. And then I also wanted to know, is it far enough along that you might have something on your website, the city website, that I could kind of learn a little bit more about what Richmond is doing as far as San Pablo Avenue, so that I can work with Pinole and see if we can't participate? And then one last question. Where does the initiative come from in Richmond to do something like this? Is it city staff that says, hey, let's do this, let's look for grants? Or is it somebody on council? How does this kind of get started? Because it's not happening in Pinole, and I'd like to look at other cities that are making it happen and figure out how to make it happen in Pinole.
Good questions. I'm going to start with your last question.
Okay.
So how do these things happen? It happens, I would say, all of the above. Some of them are from the plans. General plans, specific plans. Some of them are joint with other agencies. Of course, San Pablo Avenue, any major work on San Pablo Avenue will be coordinated with various other agencies up and down the corridor. Some of the projects are actually coming from the community. So we have a very engaged community in Richmond. I've been an employee for about 9.5 years, and I was pleasantly surprised at how engaged the community was with city business, including capital projects. I mentioned earlier about the work going on, various projects going on at the Richmond Greenway, and I'm learning. Every time I turn around, I'm learning something new. I'm working with a local nonprofit, and they've raised in excess of $20 or $30 million for various projects over the last decade, and they're kind of a driving force behind getting a lot of funding. So I would say it's from all of the above. On this project in particular, the San Pablo Avenue Complete Streets project, for which we had $151,000 expended in fiscal year 16-17, that project has already been constructed. The location is I'll tell you where the location is. It's near the Hilltop Mall. this project is in the city of Richmond and in the city of San Pablo. It's the city of San Pablo that actually applied for a federal grant in order to implement this project. The city of Richmond and the city of San Pablo had gotten together in 2011 and 2012. They'd hired a consultant. They got I think it was an economic justice or environmental justice grant from Caltrans to develop a plan. Once the plan was developed, it was used as the 30% concept design to then go after the construction grant, design and construction grant, which is from OBAG, round one. So the city of San Pablo was the implementing agency. It's interesting to note that 80% of the construction work is in the city of Richmond, and it's serving the residential community in the city of San Pablo that's behind the city limit. So it's one of those situations. Construction's been completed. In August, we're going to turn on 2 traffic signals, and then we'll be done. So I invite you to drive through San Pablo Avenue, starting at the Richmond Parkway and heading south into through the city of Richmond into the city of San Pablo. You're always welcome to contact me. I can give you a tour of the site and answer questions as well. I'll be happy to do that. So you had the third question was you had alluded to more of a corridor project involving maybe City of Albany, City of El Cerrito, Emeryville, Berkeley, Oakland, everybody, right? Everybody except your neck of the woods, which I'm sorry that you've been excluded. And, I wish there was a way to have all of the cities included, but that's way beyond my pay scale, right? So we do have something, there has been some, I wish I knew, I think it was Alameda County that was the driving force behind this particular design concept. And we've seen like round one of the design concepts where they give you 2 or 3 options. It's a bus rapid transit, reducing the number of travel lanes, having a cycle track, having a bicycle lane, things like that. But I think that's many years in the future. So have I answered your questions? Okay, good.
Hi, I'm Bruce from El Cerrito. My compliments to Richmond on the I-80 corridor. My wife and I do a lot of walking over the weekend, and for us to go from our house to Costco or Ranch 99 it's just a safe, it's very safe now. It used to be before you could easily get clipped by a car. The question that I really have to ask is, at the Dolan Lumber parcel, is there any plans to put housing there?
Can you tell me the name of the parcel?
You know where Dolan Lumber is on Central Avenue on the south side?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, there is, there's a planned housing development, right? And part of that is a little bit of a creek restoration as well. Yeah. I don't know where it is in the process. I know that our consultants for Central Avenue Phase 2 were communicating with the developer regarding some right-of-way issues because we have a roadway kind of, let's call it a widening, a little bit of a roadway widening in that area for the side street, namely San Mateo, south of Central. So I know we got a hold of their initial plans, but I don't know where in the entitlement process that is.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, hi there. Thanks for coming in. Really excited by the amount of projects that are coming out of Richmond. What I want to sort of talk about for a second, sort of building on what Kent was talking about, was just some of the conditions of the roads in the northern and western part of Richmond, which I understand we're doing a lot of sort of interesting projects, but I do notice that it looks like the roads have sort of deteriorated in quality. There's a lot of lines that need repainting. There's a lot of potholes that haven't been touched in a while. And so this is some of the examples here, literally sort of on Cutting Boulevard as you're sort of going west. There's just a ton of potholes, right, as so you would get on track to go down, I don't know the street, but go down toward the ferry there. And it seems like as you cross the train tracks, it's sort of a dangerous intersection as a consequence. Another example was on Market Bullitt Market Ave, west of Rum Mill, sort of going over the train tracks there. There's just huge like lumps like over the train tracks, like sort of 4 feet tall, and I see people come to nearly a complete stop there, even though there's no sort of flashing lights. I don't know if that's even an actively used railway, but folks are coming to a complete stop without sort of any sort of real warning, and that also is very dangerous and needs to be addressed. And the last one that I wanted to talk about, not exactly sort of about road conditions, but the Richmond Parkway Transit Center has very faded lines, almost non-existent, and as a consequence, folks line up as they're trying to wait for their tech shuttle or they're waiting for the AC Transit bus, and they sort of get into the street a bit, and I see folks sort of turn into this transit center and nearly get hit. I see this actually fairly regularly. On top of that, the sort of the parking machines where you go to pay are frequently broken. I've heard complaints of sort of break-ins in the area, and I don't know who's accountable for that, whether it's San Pablo, whether it's something in Terra Hills, or whether it's you guys or BART or somewhere else. But it's definitely needs some ownership to be brought up and improved, given that there's so many different transit stops and buses, et cetera, that go into that area. And with that, sort of, I'll stop.
Okay. Thank you. I took some notes here. I'll work backwards. The Richmond Parkway Transit Center, is that off of Bloom? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I actually don't know who owns it and operates it. I presume it's either AC Transit or Caltrans or both. AC Transit. So I'll take a look at it and see what we can do. If it's a city street, if you're bringing up some points about a city street, we can certainly have our signs and lines crews go out there and refresh the thermoplastic traffic striping. If it's AC Transit, then we'll work with them. The Richmond, the Market Avenue west of Rumrill, I'd have to take a look at it. Rumrill happens to be in the city of San Pablo. 13th Street, which is contiguous with Rumrill, is in the city of Richmond. So I'd have to take a look at this particular street, Market Avenue. It doesn't ring a bell, but it may be Richmond's. Some of the city limits and county limits out there are funky. So I'll take a look, and if it's not in Richmond, I know who to call in the county, and I know who to call in the city of San Pablo to take a look at it. Cutting Boulevard going west, you said crossing the train tracks. Can you clarify? Well, because Cutting Boulevard is a very long street. The train tracks near Carlson Boulevard, is that the one you're talking about?
I think so. I can.
Or there's train tracks over by Point Richmond. There's two locations that I can think of where we have train tracks. And I think if it's for bicycling, it's over by Point
I'm
Richmond.
talking about, West Cutting Boulevard over near 2nd Street.
South 2nd Street, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The roadway condition of West Cutting. All right. I made a note of it. And the traffic striping as well.
Yeah. Yes. And there's sort of one other one that I didn't bring up. When you're going sort of east on Cutting, to make that left-hand turn onto I-80, there's so much traffic coming out Cutting. I see folks make some pretty dangerous lefts to try and make that turn because there isn't an arrow, because there isn't an easy way to otherwise make that left. I don't know if there's been a number of collisions there or not, but it's clearly sort of a spot where like some more sort of oversight, like a clear turning lane or, again, a traffic would provide a great benefit. It's particularly because what also happens is traffic builds up there and goes sort of further back on Cutting, so you can end up sort of blocking folks who are looking to make a turn further west on the road there.
I might need some clarification. I'm trying to visualize Cutting, heading east.
Yeah, you go right under the underpass, and then folks want to make that left onto 80.
Okay. Yeah. Is that the one that's kind of in the middle? Middle of the free. Let me take a look at it.
Okay.
So, and I think what you're asking for is, I just want to qualify my answer. We'll do what we can, but that
Sure.
might be Caltrans jurisdiction, If it's
Okay.
underneath a Caltrans highway or adjacent to the Caltrans on-ramps and off-ramps, we may have to go through all of Caltrans's bureaucratic hoops in order to make effective changes.
You are hanging out under the highway there, so I suspect it would be Caltrans then.
But we know who to call at Caltrans and to set up a field meeting and to talk about it, so that's not a problem.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Zane, would you like to?
I just want to say thank you for a very thorough presentation. Zane from City of Oakley, but one thing I did notice, in Richmond by the BART station, I think there's Social Security. I was wondering, they were talking about having high-density housing in that area for many years. Do you know the progress they've gotten with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, Metro Walk Village would be the name of the housing development that was installed on the west of the BART tracks in the area immediate vicinity of the BART station, west of the BART tracks, Metro Walk Village. On the other side, there are some old parking lots that are currently undeveloped that are planned for development for high-density housing, including some affordability. Sorry, I don't know all the lingo. Affordable units for to meet these requirements for very low and moderate affordability. So I know that's in the works. I know the city has received some proposals from developers. I think the city selected a developer, but that process for entitlements could take years. And since I'm not directly involved with it, I don't really have the current status.
Thank you. I was one more question would be, so when you say there's, does the city know of any such as apartment buildings or high density housing, meaning like multiple units that would be right in front of the BART property to make it more walkable?
Yeah, so they would be on the east side of the tracks, 3 or 4 stories tall with apartments, with some parking underneath, so that it's basically walking, your walking distance to the BART station.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions for our representative from Richmond, Bruce, would you like to?
Yes, thank you. The City of El Cerrito would like to recommend that we accept Richmond's GMP program and pass on to the next level.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? It's unanimous. Thank you very much for your presentation tonight, and I hope your trip back to Richmond is uneventful.
Thank you.
You should be working for the tourism department there, actually.
I second that.
Oh, maybe when I retire.
Okay, we've been through all of our reports and our presentations, and now let's get into an election for chair and vice chair. And I think we'll start with any nominations that you may have for the office of chair.
Ed Miller, I would like to nominate Larry Wyrick.
All right, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, thank you. We have a nomination and a second. Any further nominations? I see where this is going. Okay, well, thank you. Well, let's just do all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Any opposed? And abstentions. Okay, I guess I'm chair. All right, now let's have a nomination for vice chair. can't do both jobs. Zane, were you nominating yourself?
I don't know if I should nominate myself.
I would like to nominate Zane.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a nomination by Patricia. Nominated Zane. Yeah. Okay, we got that all cleared up. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Zane, congratulations. And
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll fill in very well for me.
I'll watch you carefully.
Okay, thanks. All right, we move on to reports. Does anyone, or has anyone attended meetings or anything during the past month they'd like to report on? Ed?
Yes, Larry, I know we've all been here a while, so don't worry, I'm not going to drag this out. Ed Miller, Clayton. So I was on the phone call last night. That was the telecon for CCTA. It was an interesting format. They basically presented very little at the very beginning of the call and opened it up mostly just for call-ins for Q&A. 4 times during the call, they injected a request for respondents on the call to touch their pad 1, 2, or 3, yes, no, or I don't know, for their feelings about various incentives. One was about senior. Do people want to see a senior commitment? A commitment to like senior transportation, busing, and stuff like that. One was more along the lines of do people want to see CCTA commit to projects to reduce greenhouse gases and things along those lines. It was an environmental sort of slant. I don't remember the other 2. I apologize, but there were 4 questions. The questions spanned a lot of different things. One was about senior, a woman who was having trouble getting to her ping pong tournaments. But an elderly woman, obviously, and so there was some discussion of that. There were some interesting things that came up about larger metropolitan kind of transportation plans. Like I heard things about ferries from possibly being conceived from Antioch and Antioch and Bay Point stations, which has never been feasible up to this point, but I guess they're going to start thinking Martinez as well. So there was talk of that. There was a lot of talk about the 684 interchange. It was interesting. A woman called in saying, "Is there anything going to be done to, make it safer to get onto South 680 from Highway 4?" And I thought, man, that somebody planted that person, because of course Julie got right on and said, "Well, I'm happy to say we have construction going on that right now, right?" Mm-hmm. So. There was one other thing which was exciting to me from my area, which is that on Ignacio Valley Road, one of the projects that is coming down the pike is something to build a third lane, extend down from Cowell all the way back to Michigan Boulevard, which is not quite to Clayton Road, but to get people in that third lane so they can just shoot down and turn right onto Cowell earlier and get over onto Treat. So it sort of spreads out the traffic a little bit earlier. I myself often use that route, so sitting there waiting until you can get up to the light at Cowell for that tiny little turn lane, that turn lane is going to be extended back, like a mile and a half. It'll make a big diff. So anyway, it was a good call. I'd be interested to hear at some point what the survey results were for the 4 questions. That might be nice to know.
Maybe it'll be on the website.
Yeah, but hearing about these things definitely created a sense of excitement for me to get my butt in gear to do the 3rd Wednesday in here and see the full board convene, because I would like to hear I just want to hear more about some of these things that are being considered.
I think it's interesting that there was interest raised in ferry service from Antioch and Bay Point. And, you know, based on what we've seen with the Hillcrest extension of BART and to the Richmond ferry service, I mean, their expectations have been met and exceeded so early. So, you know, ferry service from points, you know, east of Richmond certainly may be feasible.
Incredible demand in our cities.
And one of the, I don't remember, I mean, I know Julie was on, I can't remember the other gentleman that was on responding to most questions and moderating, but he was just saying, you know, it may not be taking tens of thousands of cars off the road, but the, you know, what he felt like they had learned in their time is that reductions of even a small percentage of traffic have outsized impacts on the actual travel time commute on the roads. You don't have to remove 10% of the traffic to remove 10% of the travel time. So even getting hundreds of people off the road might be well worth it. And of course, because I'm me, I had to put my question in about, you know, more about building jobs out in the east, you know, in the far east county, as opposed to, you know, transportation projects with a B behind them on the dollar sign. And I specifically pointed to the Naval Weapons Station and was informed that one of the things that they have done there is the autonomous track for autonomous vehicles for testing, which doesn't necessarily create a lot of jobs there, but they were just saying it was used for commercial use. They did say that on that space there will be jobs there will be building a facility in that area to construct the cars that will go on the BART, either the E-BART or the BART. I don't know which one, probably the BART, I assume. So there will be some manufacturing jobs to make the BART cars out there, and that's some number of you know, good jobs. But I just, of course, nudged
quite a few
more in that.
I think somewhere between 100 and 200 jobs, I think.
Yeah.
It's going to be called the Bombardier plant. Bombardier is
cool.
the name of the company out of Canada.
That's cool.
We'll be producing a lot of BART cars.
Wow.
Can I interject? My next door neighbor in Byron works in Pittsburgh, and they are dividing her building where she works. She is building cars for Hawaii, like BART cars for Hawaii, and they are moving them all over. It's interesting. The people in charge of her project can only be here for 3 months at a time because they are from Italy and have an accent. And so they switch them every 3 months who's in charge. But these people from Italy are moving their production into half of the building because the other half of the building is where the new BART cars are going to be made. So just for your information.
Yeah, interesting times ahead.
Fascinating.
Okay, any further reports? Okay. Any member comments or staff comments? Okay. Any correspondence or news clipping? Matt.
I'll just make a couple of comments, Chair Wyrick. Just building off of the comments about the telephone town hall last night. So the one that Ed listened to was focused on Central County. And in your packet on page 5.1-1, there's a schedule for the remaining ones. There's one for West County next Wednesday, one for Southwest County, which is La Miranda and San Ramon Valley, on August 6th, and one for East County on Thursday, August 8th. That they focus on those areas, but you can definitely call in if you're from another part of the county, but just know that they're going to focus on projects and things going on in those parts of the county. I heard last night that we had somewhere around 2,000 people on the call at any point in time. Does that sound right, Kiki? So we learned this in 2016. These are a way to really reach a lot of people. You can go onto our website and sign up, and you'll get a phone call when it starts to bridge you in. So you don't even have to call. You just wait for the call to come in, or you can call in yourself. Either way. But yeah, exactly. You just sign up and you get a phone call.
What page was that on?
5-5.1-1. Yeah. So this is really to get public opinion on where to invest our hopeful future monies here in the county, and is a great way to hear from a lot of people. You know, the old traditional way of doing a meeting at a community center or something. We still will be doing some in-person meetings, but we will do that and get 20 people in the door, and half of them are already associated with the authority or the cities or something. So it's like, we really were looking for a better way to reach more people. And Lindsay Willis, who spoke to you guys about the plan a couple months ago, she's really spearheading this. And so we're really reaching a lot of people, and encourage you guys to phone in the next 3 meetings. So just wanted to note that. And we will, the draft expenditure plan is in your packet. We didn't do a presentation this month because it really hasn't changed since last month, but it'll be finalized in August, on August 21st, but there will be 3 meetings in between now and then. So a meeting on the 7th, the 14th, and the 21st, where we'll really go through and finalize what is in the plan. So your feedback is always welcome. Just encourage you to participate in the telephone town halls. That's all I have.
Okay. I think we've concluded our business for the evening, and unless anyone has any concerns to raise at this point, okay, we stand adjourned.
Okay.
Remember, our next meeting is September 25th.